Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Michelle Taylor-Smith, and I'm the Senior Director of Channel Marketing here at Nutanix, and I'd like to welcome you to our second Town Hall meeting. Today's meeting is about an hour. It's going to be based solely on questions that you guys have submitted. As you'll remember, part of the registration process, we asked for questions, and we received hundreds of questions, which I have grouped into certain areas. That we'll be going throughout the town hall. Before we go any further though, along with the questions, we got a lot of amazing remarks. So thank you to all of you that put remarks in, and just so you know, we'll be sharing those with the rest of the company because we got some very, very kind words, so thank you for that. If we do not get to your questions, we will give our salespeople and our channel account managers the questions to get back to people directly. And if you have additional questions during the event, please feel free to use the console of the broadcast, and you can submit questions at that point, and we will try to get to as many as we can. The recording of the broadcast will be made available after the event. So if you need to come back to information, or if you'd like to share it with coworkers, we will be sending out the link after the event. So with the housekeeping pieces out of the way, I'd like to introduce our distinguished guests. We have Dheeraj Pandey, who is the CEO and co-founder of Nutanix, and we also have Sunil Potti, who is the Senior VP of Engineering and Product Management. So welcome, gentlemen.
Hi, Michelle.
Thank you.
We have a lot of questions, so before we do anything, thoughts or anything else, we're just going to jump right into these questions because we have a lot of really good things. The first section is really around vision. We got a lot of questions on, what are we doing, where are we going? There's been a lot of recent announcements. So could you just spend a couple of minutes on on hyperconverged as a market, where you think it's going to go over the next 1 to 2 to 5 years, and specifically around public cloud. There was a lot of interest in hyperconverged and public cloud.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you everyone for being here and for all your questions and for your participation, and for also helping build this company. We, at Nutanix, all the executives and myself included, we truly believe in the community, the channel itself, and how you folks can actually help build this. So thanks again for doing this. I've always said that the word hyperconverged is basically a hype, and it probably will be a fad that will come and go away in the next couple of years. The true nature of the transformation really is what's really happening to enterprise computing. And Sunil calls it the replatforming of the data center. So I think what happened in the 80s with from going from mainframe to client server created some very large companies, multi-billion-dollar companies, and Oracle, Microsoft, Cisco, Adobe, and so on, Sun Microsystems. Again, in the 90s, there was another replatforming that happened away from client server to internet-based computing. And the last decade was about virtualization, and this decade is actually about this collapsing of everything into pure software, which is basically the big replatforming. And I think we made storage invisible along the way. The last 5 years, we said, a big part of this re-architecture is really making sure that storage shouldn't be consumed the way it was being consumed as a separate box. So we brought it in, we distributed it, we disaggregated it, we sharded it into software. And in the next 3 to 5 years, we'll actually do similar things with virtualization and in the public cloud as well. In fact, I go back to the analogy of an iPhone, which is one of my favorite analogies, that if you think of what happened with the replatforming of our personal lives, basically each of these things are separate devices. And then came Apple with a killer app in music and said, we'll collapse music and phones together and build this new converged device, on top of which everything else becomes pure software. And the rest is history. They stitched together iCloud and PhotoStream and everything else, and just became one big whole where you owned a device and you rented a service, and together they worked cohesively. So I think a big part of what the next 5 years looks like is to make a lot of these details go away. Just the way storage will go away. I think we believe that we've taken a big chunk of complexity out of storage, and the way we are giving it to our application guys to go and consume this, same thing will happen to VMware and hypervisors and public cloud as well.
Sounds good. I mean, I think I'll just take the latter half of it, which is about what inspirations we have drawn from the public cloud, actually, to help re-platform the enterprise data center. And if you really think about how, customers have embraced public cloud, I think from our perspective, it boils down to a few simple things, right? Beyond all the marketing jargon or the enamorment with actually, trying out new things in terms of technologies and so forth, I think it comes down to could you start quickly with a project that your business users want you to start as an IT person? Could you start small so that you're right-sizing it, bite-sizing the infrastructure spend to match your business spend? And then eventually, as your business demands scale up and down, you scale up and down your infrastructure, which is pay as you grow, right? So if you can do those three things, start quickly, start small, and pay as you grow, and if you can embody that same constructs outside of the public cloud, which is where it exists, inside your enterprise, then you have a game-changing, as we call it, a re-platforming journey for the enterprise data center. And that's really how we see this transition to this next generation of enterprise computing that Dheeraj pointed out, which we are calling as invisible infrastructure, where we have now started making storage invisible, and we're going to elevate that to make virtualization invisible, and eventually raise the abstraction construct so that you can actually build applications and services meeting the demands of your business community in the same way that public cloud is currently serving them.
Mm-hmm. So we've actually got a couple questions on that too. So do you think, and one of them specifically is, do you think that the growth of hyperconvergence and the ease of management that comes with it could possibly reverse the trend of compute moving to cloud? So
yeah, I think Dheeraj, I, and most of our colleagues at Nutanix obviously have this discussion all the time, and with customers and partners as well. And I think the way we look at it is that public cloud is here to stay long term. In fact, for certain workloads in the enterprise, it's probably the best thing, long term and short term. And when we really look past the adoption of public cloud beyond its initial hype cycle, what we see is that, every enterprise is going to have a combination of predictable workloads and elastic workloads. Mm-hmm. And clearly for elastic workloads that you spin up Elastic MapReduce job or a Hadoop job, and you run some financial calculations at the end of the quarter for 3 days or 3 hours or something like that, and you need 100 machines, it's a great use case for actually leveraging Amazon or Google or something like that, right? But when you look at every enterprise, we believe that a whole chunk of the enterprise market also has a combination of elastic workloads, plus also a lot of predictable workloads, where you run the workload kind of like your order management system, maybe grows 10%, reduces 10%, but when you do the simple economic math of running that in a public cloud infrastructure, then the cost of running something that is predictable 365 days a year, 7 by 24, for over 3-5 years, the math sort of works against you from the pure economics of rent versus lease versus buy, right? Mm-hmm. However, today, if you look at it, this is where the real opportunity for us is that basically, if we could capture the essence of that same cloud-like architecture inside the enterprise, but change the economics associated with it, so that while it's easy to consume, easy to scale, pay as you grow and all that good stuff, but it has the economics of something that you've owned and that you actually control the spend on for predictable workloads. I think to us, the adoption of public cloud actually fosters and nurtures the internalization in enterprise IT that they need to further re-platform their data center to look like the public cloud for those predictable workloads. And oh, by the way, as we'll talk about more, and some of you guys might know, we also have the ability to actually say, look, while we will provide you this infrastructure on premise, if you want to choose something externally like Amazon or Azure and so forth, we can gracefully migrate workloads back and forth as well. So from that optionality perspective as well, that's part and parcel of our long-term strategy.
Also, I think, if you were to look at, again, history of the last 3 decades, good channel partners, and I'm talking about the channel folks in the audience, have always figured out a way to reinvent themselves. Whenever a re-platforming happened, the first time, probably they were selling a lot of mainframe, and they said, look, client server is here, we've got to sell more Microsoft licenses and Oracle licenses and Cisco boxes and things like that. In the 90s, they said rather than selling a lot of beefy clients in a client-server architecture, we'll sell beefy servers and Oracle databases and WebLogic servers and networking and things like that. Again, last decade, they were selling probably a lot of servers, and some of these people were a little bit concerned with VMware, saying, am I going to sell fewer servers?
Mm-hmm.
But with virtualization, they actually sold even more so because people did more.
Mm-hmm.
You know, more projects because there was more agility. You could start small, you can pay as you grow, things like that. So every time a replatforming happens, there's always this angst about this loss aversion of business.
Mm-hmm. The shift.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but as long as they align themselves with the right vendors who are not looking at the future as an enemy, but future as a friend, where the re-architecture and the winds of change are tailwind as opposed to a headwind, good things will happen to channel partners who are willing to reinvent themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a lot of money to be made in the public cloud as well. I mean, we've barely begun to talk about what does it mean to really come and intermediate access between Amazon and Azure, or Google and Azure, or things like that. You know, there's a ton of money to be made that you know, we've barely started to scratch the surface of.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot ahead of us in the next 5 years. So stay tuned in how you can make money on the public cloud as well. You know.
Great. Since we have head of our product here, we're going to shift to products a little bit, and we had a lot of questions around there. So you've talked already a little bit about the vision and strategy and some of the problems we're trying to solve. But where are our products going? Can you talk a little bit more about that? And we've obviously made a lot of announcements recently and stuff. So just give people a little bit more flavor of what we're doing and where we're going.
Yeah, I mean, just to give you guys a quick recap of what we've outlined at our .next conference, as well as our unveiling of our long-term product strategy. I think as we mentioned, this is a journey to invisible infrastructure, in our opinion, and the end game is about making things simple. For business users to deploy, you know, IT applications, IT administrators to actually react, to actually meet their demands and so forth. And for us, you know, if you just compare it, it's as simple as it should be, as, you know, IT, you know, procurement to deployment to operations should be as simple as a light switch, right? Where the light switch is it just works all the time. Mm-hmm. Behind the light switch is a whole bunch of machinery and electric gears and so forth that can provide you unlimited power and scale as you need it. And then the consumption paradigm is all about, you know, pay as you grow, right? So, so our goal is to actually transform enterprise IT, starting from the storage stack onwards, to virtualization and the overall cloud abstraction, as we mentioned. And we're doing that with our platform called as XCP, Extreme Computing Platform, which we unveiled in June. And XCP consists of two product families, right? Acropolis and Prism. And if you really sort of like double click into the actual stack per se, you know, what we've done is essentially abstracted out from a hardware perspective, the runtime, so that across any hypervisor or container or cloud fabric, you can actually deliver an invisible storage fabric, which we're calling as DSF, the distributed storage fabric, while unlocking the power of application mobility using this product portfolio called as Application Mobility Fabric. So between AMF and DSF, our product portfolio of Acropolis essentially enables a customer to seamlessly start, if I can call it, you know, making storage invisible and virtualization invisible as the first two steps. And with Prism, we have this unique approach of actually wrapping this infrastructure in this easy to consume interface. That is a delight, that brings delight to an end user from a day-to-day operations, but also subsumes a lot of the complexity, so that every normal function in day-to-day operations is essentially one click. I mean, I'll give you an example. I mean, a couple of weeks after I joined, I went to this customer. We were up in Washington, and one of the architects in one of the business units was actually already a Nutanix customer, and the CIO was there, and we were just trying to talk about the value of Nutanix, and the CIO, I know it's a big, you know, storage shop from an incumbent storage vendor and all that, and the architect interrupts me in the middle and says, "Look, wait a second. I mean, just to put your things in perspective, because there was a small Nutanix deployment already in one of the business units." He goes, "Look, you know, remember those days when we used to take a 72-hour weekend break to actually go upgrade our cluster and so forth, for order management and so forth, get the storage guy, the networking guy, everybody involved. Well, last Thursday at 3 o'clock, we upgraded our order management system on Nutanix, and at 3:08 p.m. it was done on a Thursday afternoon, right? So that sense of operational comfort and simplicity is what Prism brings to the table, powered by the Acropolis fabric, right? So in a nutshell, I think these are the two foundational pieces of our product strategy. Acropolis and Prism together form the Nutanix XCP platform.
I think one thing that at least I've started to hear a little bit from some of the stakeholders, and probably it's going to be more true in the channel as well, has this terminology made it a little bit more complex in terms of the storytelling? Because we used to just be one bundle, NOS. And people used to associate us with hyperconvergence, like, yeah, they get rid of storage, so they have a distributed file system. But things are changing, as we go and try to define the new design point for the compute of the next decade with containers and a hypervisor that's lean and mean and thin and secure, and has the burden of responsibility of all of storage, all of EMC and NetApp and pure software on the hypervisor's dime itself. We are going and saying, at the end of the day, we have to have a filer functionality and a SAN-like functionality and a ton of things that's iSCSI, which is something that we hadn't really done before. You can't call it a file system anymore because it delivers blocks, right? So it had to be changed to a distributed storage fabric. Now the app mobility fabric is basically the drag and drop. It's the vMotion of the next decade, which is basically the big way in which you can go and re-architect the hypervisor, because the hypervisor used to be about the same brand on both motherboards, and you drag and drop, you can do vMotion, storage vMotion. But in a multi-cloud world, has gotten more complex. So you need to have this notion of mobility. Hence the reason for this app mobility focus in this company. Now it's more complex than selling a hypervisor, but people have to internalize what a multi-cloud world looks like, and so some of these terminologies, while they've actually made us more than just a bundle and the word HCI, but as a company, we're constantly pushing the envelope of what is HCI. It can be an end in itself. It's a means to an end. And I think what I would request people is to bear with us as we go around this journey of trying to simplify this terminology, and the more we actually internalize why did they start calling it distributed storage fabric as opposed to NDFS, or why did they introduce AMF and things like that? What's this whole category called Acropolis? Because it's not a hypervisor, it's not an EMC box, it's something in the middle that's blended together. There will be some angst, and we are out here listening to you, trying to figure out a way to simplify more and more every day.
Yeah, and a related question that we obviously we get quite often is, okay, so why did we build our own hypervisor to some extent?
That's going to be my
right?
You're not supposed to answer the question.
So
that's my job.
I guess we paid attention to the script. I think it's related to sort of finish the point that Dheeraj was talking about is, look, as we elevate the sort of abstraction construct in the enterprise, right? And this is where I think there's a lot of value to the original point that Dheeraj was mentioning about. There's a huge opportunity for channel partners to actually help in that replatforming journey. Increasingly, lock-in becomes an issue, and AMF's primary job as a goal is to ensure that just like we were able to commoditize storage, we can commoditize the virtualization runtime so that it allows applications to not be locked into a particular hypervisor runtime. Clearly, while we will try to streamline that function, there will be a variety of services and value add that need to be done around it to actually provide that no lock-in paradigm. And I think that's a huge opportunity for many of our partners as we start looking at Acropolis in more detail and getting a handle into AMF. I think you guys will really realize the power of what does it mean to actually take that value proposition to your customers, right? But to land that in the first instantiation, we needed a target environment to actually demonstrate what does it mean to actually do a single-click migration from one hypervisor to another hypervisor, from our Acropolis hypervisor to a container, or from, say, ESX to Acropolis or ESX to public cloud. So Acropolis hypervisor is essentially taking the widely popular KVM distro, but making it productized one as a first-class citizen within the Nutanix family, so it's well behaved, it's managed well The storage fabric is, intricately and seamlessly integrated into it. It's high performance. All the issues that persisted with public KVM.
Well,
we've
also
sort of
basically what Red
fixed.
Hat couldn't do is what we're trying to do better, much better.
Yeah, and then as a wrapper around it, if you can now abstract out the facts that you can actually do one-click conversion from one hypervisor to another hypervisor. You can actually do one-click provisioning of VMs. You can do one-click, the whole paradigm now could be actually given as a role model saying, look, this is the state of being that you can get to. On day one, it's on Acropolis hypervisor. On day two, it'll be on containers. On day three, it'll be on public cloud.
So you've talked about some of the applications and stuff. So what are we doing, and what's the strategy about getting closer with some of our alliance partners like Citrix and Microsoft and that? How is that affecting that, and what are we doing from an engineering and integration standpoint?
I mean, I think, look, we have a multi-layered industry partner strategy, right? Starting from the substrate of the hardware runtime and platforms. We have both, obviously, Supermicro that we use under the cover as a delivery mechanism, but primarily Dell as our, platform partner of choice. And then at the same time, beyond just hardware, we're also, we have a good relationship from a container runtime with Docker and CoreOS at the lowest level of substrate. Then on top of that, we have the actual application substrate partners, which is the two, there's multiple Linux distros between Canonical, Ubuntu, as well as, of course, Microsoft being a big chunk of that layer. And then on top of that are the application/services partners, whether it be a combination of Citrix, Brocade, F5, Palo Alto, a whole bunch of partners here in the ecosystem that have been validated and jointly certified on Acropolis. But I would say that the, as an example, the recent partnership that we have announced with Citrix Zen Desktop being validated and supported on the Acropolis runtime, which is not just the overall fabric, but also on the Acropolis hypervisor, provides almost a industry first, best-in-class TCO for VDI deployments. Because now you're abstracting out not only the complexity and the cost of the storage switching, the storage and the compute layers, but also the virtualization layers in a turnkey solution for a Zen Desktop environment.
Good. And how about Microsoft and Azure, and how are we working more with them?
So Microsoft, I mean, as many of you guys know, obviously is a strategic partner for us across multiple fronts, right? We've also announced, obviously, partnerships around Azure, where just like we support Cloud Connect to Amazon, we will be supporting Cloud Connect to Azure as a, inbuilt function within Nutanix, so you can start with a workload on Nutanix and then do a backup and then eventually DR into Azure and so forth. But beyond that, I think, to us, Microsoft is kind of like, Microsoft workloads are the, from the way we look at it, are some of the primary workloads that we support, whether it be Exchange, SQL Server, the whole gamut of Microsoft workloads. So we've been very close with Microsoft to actually make sure that those workloads are rightly sized, scoped, and deployed on the Nutanix fabric, just to ease our transformation. And this is where, again, from a channel partner perspective, the more, if I can call it, expertise/value that can be provided to ensure that seamless migration from the old or the legacy to the new runtime is going to be of critical alignment with our long-term strategy, right? So Microsoft would be, I think, in a nutshell, I think looking backwards, looking today, as well as looking forward, going to be a pretty strategic partner for us.
So we got a lot of questions about competition and that, and one of the good questions that we received specifically was, how does Nutanix continue to innovate faster than larger companies, especially with their ability to throw money at R&D?
If you again go back to history, many large companies have tried to throw money at the problem, and good money after bad. Oracle tried doing this against Siebel in the 90s, and we know that. Everybody thought that Microsoft has been able to do it with Netscape, with the Internet Explorer browser, so it can be done with everything else. But what people didn't realize is that Netscape got lazy along the way as well. Became a company where people had a sense of entitlement, went public, it was, poster child of this and that, and there were Casanovas that formed out of, there was a ton of stuff that was just decadent at Netscape. It was not just that Microsoft threw money at the problem, it was also that they had a better product coming as well, and they had built a whole lot more on the browser that Netscape had actually just initially invented but was not constantly reinventing. So ever since, I think in the last 20 years, we have seen a lot in the enterprise where people try to throw money, good money after bad. But the design point of a new product has to be, and I've talked about this all the time, it's one of my favorite terms these days, is empty canvas.
Mm-hmm.
You need to get rid of a lot of the baggage and the distractions around you to create something that disrupts yourself. You know, how do you really go and look at your existing products that were built 10, 15 years ago, and can you actually say, forget those and start on a clean slate? You know, that's what big companies are not good at. They're not good at that. They're not good at risk-reward equations where you can actually hire the best of the best and be able to differentiate and discriminate them against everybody else, because there's value in looking at scalers different from builders, different from maintainers. You know, can you really distinguish between the three and so on? So in general, I think the industry, 10 years ago, VMware sold itself to EMC because they thought that Microsoft is here to commoditize the hypervisor market. This is 2003, 2004 timeframe. At a time when Hyper-V was still 10 years away from really being production. So time and time again, this has actually happened where the smaller companies have actually either had the courage to actually say that, you know, you can actually go and build a brand on your own, or they've actually cowered down because they thought that the big companies will come and overspend on them. And money is never a solution to anything. You know, it's going to come down to focus, and it's going to come down to design, it's going to come down to risk-reward equations and so on. That's how you build big brands and large companies, actually. You know.
And agility. Having worked at some large companies before, and the difference between large companies and Nutanix is just the agility. I mean, just the...
And I think it's going to come, it basically boils down to, you know, paranoia, you know, how paranoid you are, and do you have empathy for employees, customers, how do they use products, why do they actually use it this way versus that way, empathy with partners, how do partners make money, can we create a win-win situation? Because once you become a large company, you also have, you know, you grow the sense of entitlement of how everybody owes you something, you know, because along the way you forget where you came from, you know.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that I look at Amazon as a company to learn from. You know, they built a lot of things, and there are people who classically call them the book company and so on, but every 5-7 years they've said, let's go and focus on the customer and what do they need to be different, and they've always looked at themselves as a startup where there was no sense of entitlement. They said, look, I mean, our AMF, for example, talk about app mobility, we're barely scratching the surface. I mean, it's in some sense, it's like the no-SAN concept from 5 years ago is where AMF is today. It's a journey of 3 to 5 years, and we might fail for all you know, actually, in really creating the V-motion of the next decade in some sense, you know. It's that paranoia and it's that groundedness that actually helps us. Now, a lot of our competitors think that we are very arrogant and we are quite aggressive as a company. But with the people that matter, you know, whether it's employees, customers, or partners, we are extremely humble and paranoid.
Absolutely.
No,
Anything you want to add?
quality over quantity always wins.
Yeah.
Right. So.
With that, I want to sort of shift things back. You talked a little bit about company and shift things back to company. We got a lot of questions on acquisition and IPO, and I've sort of bunched them together a little bit. You know, basically, are we going to be acquired? We had questions, everything from Cisco to Dell to whomever. So would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, we are building a company for the long haul. We could very easily have sold this company in the last 5 years whenever we wanted. But we're up to something, you know, and we're up to something that could be disrupting a lot of incumbents as well. And you very rarely get a chance to build a company to this stage where you still have another 10 years in you, at least, you know. A lot of us actually think that we have a couple more acts in this company left. And, you know, when you're investors, when you're employees, when you know, our executives, myself, you're not just doing it for money, but for the highs of building a company, you know, good things happen. You're constantly making decisions for the longer term. And it's not just as of today, even 5 years ago, a lot of our decisions were built for the long haul. We've never taken shortcuts in anything. Whether you look at the Prism design, whether you look at the way we said we'll get rid of the SAN, the way we said we'll go and build an international company with growth that comes not just from within the US, from outside, all of it costed money. I mean, the way we built our systems, all the way from lead gen to marketing automation to Salesforce, I mean CRM stuff, to our support portal and so on. I mean, anybody who actually questions us for the long term versus short term in this company getting acquired, just go and log on to my.nutanix.com and you'll realize that this company is about working the whole body. Because my.nutanix.com is a portal that that probably most other companies wouldn't even look at with a lot of focus, like, well, it's not part of the product. But it's part of the customer and partner experience that we have spent a ton of time on. Just thinking about autocomplete and losing sleep on simple things, and is search working, how good is search, and so on. The attention to detail that we've actually given to even those things that are not exactly product will tell you that we're willing to burn money on the right things, because every touch point of the customer and the partner is that important. And no company that wants to get acquired will actually be that focused on simple things. I mean, look at Sizer. I mean, for those of you who are about capacity planning and looking at Nutanix experience in terms of, I mean, no company spends that kind of money on a Sizer tool as what we've actually spent. We have like 10 engineers working on just Sizer itself. There's another product that we're working on that we probably will have a chance to talk about. It's going to disrupt the way the channel is actually enabled to sell this new architecture, as opposed to just giving them cheat sheets and kill sheets and so on. We don't believe in kill sheets when it comes to competitive briefs. We'd rather give them a tool that's push button, and all of a sudden they get enabled to talk about architectures and differences and things like that. We're spending a lot of time and money and design effort on those things. No company that's about to be acquired will actually go and do all of that stuff.
But I'll just add, I mean, it's not related to the question on the company acquisition or otherwise, but I mean, it's almost an extension of the product discussion, but I'm teeing off what Dheeraj said, which is, in the next 5 years, we genuinely believe what was naturally a product market fit opportunity over the last 5 years. As we look around, we look at it honestly, we think that the market opportunity gets bigger every month. Every month, we genuinely ask the question, is it true? Is it true? But then we see, it seems like it's growing. And this is where I think, this discussion, but in general, we are very bullish on leveraging our community of partners, is because what we're now sensing is where there is pull from customers to move not just traditional virtual workloads, for example, to Nutanix, but also non-virtual workloads. Because in many countries, many states, many environments, they may as well just do a step function jump rather than go through the natural transition, right? And that requires a lot of tooling, it requires a lot of hand-holding. This is to the point of what Dheeraj was talking about, one-click Sizer, and we have a bunch of other tools coming to arm our channel community. But the sense we get is, look, now it's just not about like a VDI workload moving over or an Exchange workload moving over. In fact, I was at a financial services provider a month ago, and he was talking about finally, somehow, they're realizing that they're at the end of the mainframe era, not because of technology, but because people who are supporting it are growing old. It was as guttural as that. So they have to move those, and why not move to a virtual environment? And rather than go down the 3-tier legacy environment, why not make them move to hyperconverged, for example, or web scale? So I think we're going to see, if anything, hopefully a domino effect as we kind of have this multiple products unfolding, as we get the whole body working with the community, as we actually scale out our business, that I think there's going to be a really an exponential, at least internalization, that every quarter or so the market opportunity gets larger and larger. I think hopefully we see it, hopefully you guys will see it, or you're seeing it already, but hopefully you'll definitely see it over the next year.
So hand in hand with the acquisition question is the IPO question. Would you care to comment? And the other second question that came along with the IPO is friends and family for partners. So
sure. Yeah, in fact, so in the first one, if you think about our approach to setting expectations with the public markets, or just with the public in general, we have constantly under-promised and over-delivered. You know, even to our board and to investors alike, we've actually said, you know, we'll do this, and we end up doing this. So applying that same approach to setting expectations with the public thing, you know, we do a lot of things under the covers that we don't talk about. And when these things come out, it just becomes, oh yeah, it's natural, they're working on it or whatever, you know. So as and whenever we do it, you know, I think it's going to be a highly confidential thing, under-promised. We would not take that and, you know, convert that into some sort of a Gartner this or Gartner that and try to make, take advantage of the hype around IPO itself. The IPO to us, if it becomes a hype, it's the beginning of the end of this company, is the way I look at it. Within our employee base, we constantly underplay it. Because if we make it a destination in itself, then all of a sudden we are building mercenaries within the company, as opposed to how we came here is with missionaries. You know, basically people just said we have a mission to go and change the world. So, you know, the founder in me is very nostalgic about this thing about creating hype around you know, a public offering. It's going to happen. It's part of our growing up, but we'll do it under the covers. And as when we deliver something, it's going to be a good thing. And that good thing, I mean, I go back to the 80s of, you know, Oracle and Microsoft went public one day after each other. Adobe went the same week. Cisco went a couple of years later. They all started here, and they ended up being very large companies. You know, I mean, Amazon was $700 million in a public offering, initial valuation, and became a company that's worth so much bigger. This is a blip. Now, what the luxury that we have over many companies 20 years ago is that the private markets has so much money to actually deliver to private companies that we've not had that sort of extraneous reason to just go public for the sake of raising money. You know, this company is extremely capital efficient, and as and when we were to go public, it would not be about raising money for the sake of spending it. It's going to be about going deeper into the enterprise. It's going to be about going with the channel partners with that story that this is a company for the long haul and it's built for longevity, which is one of the things that you know, people ask us in Global 2000. Like, so are you going to be around, or are you going to be acquired, or whatever, you know? And I think when they see the scale of our business, they'd say, you know what, this is built for the long haul.
Good. Along the lines of this type of question as well as OEMs. And so how do you see the relationship with Dell continuing over the next few years? And then also specifically with Dell partners. We have Dell partners out there as well. So how does that work?
Yeah, so there's many startups today that are Nutanix killers, whose only differentiation is we'll do that in software, that these guys are doing in hardware. What they don't realize is that we are the only company that's walking the talk of delivering software at scale via OEM partners like Dell. And you know, Dell is the first OEM, but probably not the last one. I mean, as a company, we've been very open about, look, we run on top of Supermicro. We're the ones who actually legitimized and respected and gave Supermicro its due as a company. Most people in the past, storage companies, they never talked about supply chain. Like, why should we? You know, it's people would get to know about the cost of this, and they would not then pay value for our coupling or bundling. We were the first ones that came and said, no, we should talk about it, you know, because Taiwan is going to be everywhere. You know, just the way it happened with laptops, it's going to happen with servers as well. So why not talk about it and really bring them to what their due is? I think same thing with Dell. We talk about Dell in the same respect. In some sense, we compete between the NX Supermicro version and the XC version. But if we don't compete with ourselves and sort of figure out a way to stay healthy as a company in our own you know, form factors, then I think we won't be able to do that with others either. So I think Dell has been a great partner in the last 6-9 months of selling. We have learned a lot from them as well. As much as we've helped them kind of go and re-platform the data center, I think there's a lot to learn from them in the coming years or so. I mean, just this sheer scale of Dell, we are in awe of that as well, as a company that actually can bring so much to us in terms of systems and repeatability and things like that. Dell partners, are our partners just as much, and we as a company have figured out a comp model for our salespeople where they never get to look at XC as a stepchild. The NX business, the XC business are one business, and again, it's part of the business design that we've actually come to create, where even though these are actually competing in terms of the economics, eventually our salespeople think of them as the same product.
Good.
I mean, all I'll add to that is, at least over the last year worth of collaboration that we've had with them in building joint products, our product and engineering teams just love working with their Dell counterparts. It's a great relationship. We're looking forward to lots of good stuff coming out soon.
Good. We did have a couple of questions about the market, and I'm going to see, there's a couple of good ones in here. We're starting to get down on time, so I'm going to filter a couple of these questions out. One of the questions we had are customers are either, and this is about going to market together, customers are either open to hyperconvergence or they're not. What is a silver bullet to help them see the light? Because we've talked about it being a shift. It is a shift for people. What's something to help them make that shift?
As Sunil said, it's always about starting small. Start with one workload. Figure out, rather than really talk about boiling the ocean and it's going to be a re-architecture of the entire data center, because trust comes one workload at a time, right? And people have to see how simple it is, how good the support model is, where there's no finger pointing and so on. Start with one small workload, and we and other vendors in this space will actually be able to go and deliver that one thing well or not, and based on that you go and do everything else. Adoption of any new architecture or technology is a bell curve, and I think we are now about to tip over HCI into late majority, and Sunil kind of alluded to this when he talked about workloads and how we are now getting to Global 2000, where people are trying to do a whole lot more than just one or two workloads. But then identifying where your people are they late majority? Are they really that conservative to be called laggards in this adoption curve? But most of these customers also have a workload they want to start with. So work the whole body. Start with, how about Splunk, and how about virtual desktops, and how about SQL Server, how about Exchange? Start with one and then go and do the rest over time.
Yeah, I mean, all I'll briefly add is, in fact, the only time one should be encountering that question in reality is if the customers have never actually used a public cloud. Sometimes, in some cases, in fact, we joke about it a little bit, but if you don't know the value of hyperconverged, just please use AWS for a month, then you'll know what you're missing. Because you can taste the wine, and trust me, once you taste the wine, you'll want it inside. And that's what hyperconverged / Nutanix can provide for you.
That's a good point. Another question, which I thought was a great question. Some customers have expressed concern about running VMware on Nutanix due to the perceived risk of supportability. How does Nutanix help ease this concern, and how do you see the relationship of Nutanix with VMware in the future? And one of the odd questions we got is, did you get Chuck Hollis fired?
Well, I'll take the second one first. We'd not be conceited enough to say that we can get anybody fired. Now, from the back channels, we know that there were dissensions within VMware to really, do we want to market Nutanix like the way we are, where we are putting out blogs against a much smaller company that doesn't even deserve that kind of an attention and focus. We're still very small, if you realize, compared to what VMware is. I mean, we all covet to be as big as VMware, but we might fail like as 1/10 the size or something, So no, we didn't get him fired, although we do know that there was a lot of internal tension about him giving so much focus to us, and I actually was disappointed when he moved on, because I thought he was our best marketer, that we needed actually. Coming back to the first question, I think, I personally, as I said, I'm in awe of a company as good as VMware, but we'll go and have overlap of interest and we'll have conflict of interest. Just like any two good self-respecting nations are. I mean, it's not just because Germany is a friend of the US, and Germany is smaller than the US if you think about it, doesn't mean that Germany will basically accede to every request that US makes. There's an overlap of interest, there's a conflict of interest. So we have a conflict of interest with vSAN, and will, just because we have survival instinct, we'll make it such that we'll never lose to vSAN, ever. But that doesn't mean that we look at vSphere like that. There's been cooperation in this high-tech world forever. There's always been healthy cooperation between multiple companies. If you look at between VMware and Microsoft, there was cooperation. Between Oracle and SAP, there was cooperation. And I think on an everyday basis, Google and Apple, there was cooperation. So on an everyday basis, self-respecting companies, as their overall blast radius of product definition and ambition grows, they'll start to actually conflict. But the end customer is where they both become honest or not. I mean, Oracle was an arrogant company. SAP was a self-respecting company. But when it came to the customer, they would basically shudder to actually disrespect each other. Because the customer said, behave or I'll kick both of you out. Right? And along the way, they behaved and they did it right by the customer. There's no way VMware and us in front of a common customer would ever behave that is to the detriment of the end customer itself or to the partner. Right?
Yeah, I think just to summarize some of that, basically I think as we grow, and obviously as VMware covers the data center space as well, there are natural areas of synergy such as end user computing, NSX, the core vSphere part. And in areas where there's honest overlap, let customers decide. Let the better product win. Right? That's how we see it.
And the supportability aspect of that question, we're supporting VMware. There's no.
I think that was
a little bit of a red herring.
It was a non sequitur. It was mostly Chuck Hollis's argument, but I think it was. At the end of the day, I think there's a lot of goodness in terms of. Look at certifications, things like that. We have done a pretty good job, and as companies, again, we look at the end customer. And neither of us would actually do it wrong by the end customer. Imagine customers have spent hundreds of millions of dollars on Nutanix with VMware as a substrate. Any responsible company will never look at that and say, that's it, I'm yanking support. Because the customer is all powerful. And the largest of the large companies are actually being kept honest by the end customer. So I look them in the eye. If some of your customers out there, or channel partners who are proxy to your customers, realize that vendors can never take advantage of that situation and have never been in the past either, actually.
Good. We are closing towards the end of the event, and I wanted to give you both a chance to leave the audience with a few thoughts and words of wisdom.
My biggest word of wisdom is keep us honest, because one of the things that people talk about is, and there's this nostalgia with those wistful eyes and like, are we growing too big? And I think the only way to think small, even though size-wise you're becoming bigger, is to listen to external inputs that comes from channel partners or end customers, and do it right by them. Same thing with employees as well. So keep us honest, and the next 5 years we have to act as small as we were in the last 5 years, actually.
And I'll just add that, look, there's a lot of opportunity ahead, and our customers jointly require a lot of support and help. And I think just imagine as if it was circa 2009, and most of you guys were empowered with like an AWS-like stack. But in this particular case, it was for re-platforming the enterprise environment, not just the public cloud, right? And just sort of like extrapolate from there for the next 5 years, then how much of opportunity is there to go after one workload at a time to kind of help your customers through that journey, right? So I think there's a whole lot of fertile ground there that we're looking forward to working with you guys on.
Great. And just a few closing comments from my perspective. Again, as Dheeraj said earlier, thank you very, very much for joining us today. on behalf of actually of all of Nutanix, we're not going to get to where we want to get to without the support of our channel and the support of you guys. So thank you very much for that. We did get a lot of questions about certifications, about where to find the latest news, and we talked about the Nutanix customer portal earlier, but we also have the partner portal that we've done a lot of upgrades and such too. So that is the best place to get all of the latest news and information. We also have, we're updating all of our sales training, which has actually all been updated within the last few weeks. That includes all of the Acropolis information and visible infrastructure that we've talked about. And that is all available right now. And we're also building out a sales academy that should be delivered in the next few weeks that will go further into workloads and further discussions for sales folks to really get them empowered to have the conversations. So that will all be coming very, very shortly. So again, in response to some of the questions that we received. A big piece, if you had heard the information here about invisible infrastructure, our products, our strategy, and where we're going, I think most of you should know that we have .next is our user conference that we had back in June. We've actually taken that on tour now. So we are going to be in over 100 cities in over 35 countries over the next few months. It's actually started. So I encourage you to please get your customers to these events. On the portal itself, there is information about how to invite your customers and all that. But please make sure you get your customers to these events. It's great information. Apart from Nutanix people, we also have customers speaking. We have analysts speaking and stuff. So it's a really great opportunity for you to get your customers in front of this information. And then finally, also in terms of the latest news and information out to the channel. We have webinar series, monthly webinar series, and there's 3 distinct webinars that we have. We have one for technical, we have one for marketing, and actually the marketing version was this morning and also later today it'll be replayed. And then we have a general business, and those happen on differing weeks throughout the month. So if you are not aware of those, please make sure you go to the portal and sign up for them. Once you sign up, you'll be invited back to each of the webinars. So I highly, highly encourage you to participate in that, and that's one of the best ways to get all the news and information. With that, again, this broadcast will be made available as a recording. And again, with that, thank you very, very much for your participation, both gentlemen, and thank you for participating with us in the audience. Again, without your support, we're not going to get where we need to be, so it's greatly appreciated by the entire company. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.